Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sci-Fi Pol Sci. Today, we're going to be covering everybody's favorite hairy dog, bear, primate hybrids, the Wookies. And you might be thinking, Argent, why would you cover? Just stick with me, people. You'll see why we're covering the Wookiees in a minute. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so the Wookiees. So the Wookiees are one of the most iconic aspects of Star Wars. I mean, the Wiki is called Wikipedia. I think, though, a lot of their popularity comes from them being viewed as like these brutish, comedic, dim witted creatures, or as giant monster people. I'm kind of generalizing here, but I'm setting up the kind of premise of the video. Um, but there's a lot of actual deep lore, which I don't see referenced that often, and I think is very underappreciated. I also think they're interesting because they're a really good example of how things can be very different under the surface, and appearances can be deceiving, which is something I always find fun to kind of uncover. So, despite this impression that they're these like primitive race of dopey bipedal monsters, they're actually an extremely sophisticated people with a very interesting and unique culture. So, something to keep in mind as we go through this video is that the Wookiees are very much a synthesis of the traditional and the modern, or the conservative and the progressive. They have succeeded in harmonizing a lot of different things together in a very stable and functional way. And while they're extremely good with technology and craftsmanship and the like, they're also a very conservative people who take their traditions and establish ways of doing things very seriously. Now, as always, these videos are kind of a mixture of what I could find, and I fill in the blanks quite a bit. I try to indicate that in points with me saying I suppose or perhaps or something like that. But the reality is, for most of these videos I do, we just don't have like a socioeconomic political history of the Wookiees. So I'm having to kind of fill in the gaps with real world analogies or stuff that I make sense given the lore. So that being said, let's get into it. So before we can talk about the Wookiees, we have to talk a little bit about Kashik. So Kashik is a jungle forest world, kind of combined with a swamp. And about 60% of the planet is water. It does not have a tilt on its axis, so it's basically one season the entire year. So you have these giant multi-kilometer high woshire trees with frequent rain and humidity, and the floor is of the most of the planet is kind of swamp-like. There are some islands, and well, if you can see the picture, there's a lot of islands. There is like a shore that obviously doesn't have trees on it. There's also some plains and a little bit of desert where like different subspecies of Wookiees live. But by and large, Kashyyyk is mostly known for the rocher trees and as a giant forest. Now, there is some speculation that rocher trees are actually one organism. Because if they grow close enough together, they will actually start to like merge together. Like their branches will form one unit. So there's some speculation that it's one like planet spanning life form, and that has a lot of precedent because that's not uncommon in real life where you'll have a whole system of like trees and it'll look like a forest or a grove, but it will all be one organism connected by the root system. So, according to KOTOR lore, Kashyyyk was transformed by Rakatan or Rakata, but as their empire collapsed, they kind of left all the terraforming equipment running, and so it went past the point where it was supposed to stop, and it just made the planet extremely fertile, perhaps too fertile and too damp, and the soil containing too many nutritions for plants, and hence why it's kind of overgrown and teeming with life. Now, as a side note, we don't know that much about the Wookiee economy, but I would imagine that rocher trees are a very big part of their export industry. The Wookiees are very careful, like they don't really cut down that many of them or take wood out of that many of them. But I mean, you have kilometer high trees that cover the planet, so there is a lot to go around. It is considered the best wood in the known universe. And so it's always in extremely high demand. I guess it's like mahogany or rosewood or sandalwood or something like that. People like to use it however you use normal luxury hardwoods as as floorboards, for furniture, for like details, for sculpture and decorative objects. It's just a very prestigious and expensive good. And we'll talk about it in a minute, but the Wookiees, there's certain things they need to import just because of the nature of their planet. I'd also imagine that given how good Wookiees are with carving and tools in general, there's probably a cottage industry or an industry where a lot of Wookiees will probably make furniture or sculptures or other things like that. And I could see that being like a luxury good. Like if you're a wealthy senator, you have like a Worcester wood desk made by Wookiees, and it's kind of like a cool conversation piece, and it's an exotic good. Kind of like how authentic Chinese porcelain was an exotic, prestigious good in Europe. So the other thing you have to keep in mind about Kashik is, well, Pillion called it a layered death trap. So, as you might expect with a forest that's several kilometers high, there's a whole bunch of layers, kind of like how with the ocean you have like the twilight zone, the midnight zone, the day. Oh, I forget what the other ones are called, but and different creatures live in each. There's different levels of the forest, and the Wookiees live in the top one, and for good reason. Basically, the entirety of Kashyyyk is trying to kill you, and it's very good at it. The lower levels are dominated by super predators. You have giant reptilian cats. You have this name escapes me, that's basically like a rancor. And most dangerous of all, you have giant intelligent spiders that hunt in packs, that are about the size or slightly bigger than a Wookiee. So the planet's surface is not a good place to be. I think Wookiees only really go down there for the rite of passage, where they have to hunt something and learn some survival skills. Some go down there to kind of prove their courage and to hone their skills. But by and large, it's just kind of a no-go zone. It's not a place you want to be. Also, everything else, even if it's smaller, is poisonous and or venomous. It kind of reminds me of how my uncle described Malaysia when he briefly lived there. He said literally everything is trying to kill you, and if you touch anything, it's not going to end well. He said that he was talking to a guy, and a giant, like, white caterpillar fell out of a tree and landed on his arm. And the guy started screaming, and his arm immediately puffed up like a basketball, and he was in extreme amount of pain. Australia also has that reputation of just poisonous and venomous things all over the place. It's so dangerous, the Wookiees call it the Shadowlands or the Netherworld. So as big and strong as Wookiees are, they're near the bottom of the food chain. Any of these things, if they're not armed or they're taken by surprise, can and will kill them. Now, this is kind of another piece of speculation. Given the unique ecosystem and all these creatures, I'm sure there's tons of fruits and flowers and stuff. I'd imagine the Wookiees also probably have a pretty profitable export industry in some of the flora and fauna. Maybe parts of the creatures after they hunt them. But probably more importantly, I'm sure a lot of the fruits and flowers and stems and stuff like that can be used like we use things in real life for cosmetics, perfumes, medicines, vitamins. Once again, I'm sure there's all kinds of luxury goods and unique things that you can produce with these items that is not really available anywhere else in the galaxy. So I'm just trying to think a bit about how the Wookiees would make money, because once again, like I said, there's certain things they have to import from off of Kashyyyk. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Wookiee biology. So Wookiees are on average about 2.1 meters tall. Males tend to be taller than females. They are actually an arboreal species, which is why they kind of look like bears and apes. Also, they kind of had to evolve into an arboreal species because everything on the lower levels can and will kill them. So despite their size, they're actually quite agile and fast. and they can like jump from tree to tree and climb trees and stuff like that. They're an arboreal species. We don't really get a good view. This is like the best view of a Wookiee's hands I could find of their hands. But despite being very large, they are actually exceedingly dexterous, about as much so as a human. So any kind of like fine craftsmanship, or we see Chewbacca welding or repairing delicate components, or anything like that, they're perfectly capable of doing. Something just kind of an interesting side note. A lot of Wookiees you will see wear a bandolier or a vest or a belt or something. That is a cultural thing, but it's also just a practical thing. I mean, Wookiees don't wear clothes. So where are you going to put your tools and your extra ammo and your rations and stuff like that? So as a practical thing, a lot of Wookiees, particularly if they're at war or they're working, will have some sort of item on them to carry things. I don't think we ever see it in the movies, but Wookiees actually have retractable claws. I think in one of the books, Leia sees them for the first time and she's kind of shocked because she's known Chewbacca for like over a decade and she's never actually seen him take his claws out. In practice, Wookiees will only use their claws for climbing trees or if they're in a desperate situation. There's a very strong cultural taboo against using your claws because it's seen as primitive, dishonorable, and Wookiees have very bad tempers, and they're aware of that, and they want to try to avoid it. And getting into close range combat and starting to claw at something tends to trigger their anger, and so they avoid it as much as possible. Even when Wookiees fight each other, like to settle a beef or something, they aren't allowed to use their claws. If you use your claws in a fight with another Wookiee, you'll get the nickname Mad Claw and often be exiled. Just kind of an interesting side note, Wookiees are very proud of their thick fur coats. Now, given the way that their fur is used, my understanding is it's fine to call it either fur or hair. In real life, it kind of depends upon the mammal species. In some cases, it's called fur. In some cases, it's called hair. It's something they're very proud of. They take a lot of time grooming. Chewie is known for being, I think you could say, I don't know if sharp dresser or well kept is a term. He kind of looks shaggy to us, but apparently by Wookiee standards, he takes good care of his coat. Like a lot of animals, they have a double layer of coat. They have kind of like the shaggy outer part and a much thicker inner part. And that's because they live on a jungle planet. And there's lots of animals like sloths and orangutans that live in tropical environments and have fairly long hair or fur. And there are a lot of advantages to this. They're highly resistant to water, to the humidity. I would imagine on a planet that's one giant swamp, there's a lot of mosquitoes. And because they're Kashik, these are probably giant monster mosquitoes the size of small birds. So that's going to help. I'm sure it blocks a lot of the UV light and from the sun. Also, some desert creatures like camels do have fur. All right, I'm not sure if it's fur or hair I think it's hair in the case of camels. But if you look at a lot of traditional Arab guard, they will have like these full body covering white robes. And I don't entirely understand the science of it, but my understanding is it cools you down because it does more to keep the heat out than to keep the heat in. And so their fur actually helps to regulate their internal body temperature in both warm and cold climates rather than just make them overheat. So one of the things Wookiees are known for is they have extremely long lifespans. They're about 400 years. 400 years is considered very old by Wookiee standards. Their prime is in their 200s, and middle age is in their 300s. Older Wookiees are treated with a lot of respect in their culture. They often sit on the tribal councils as elders. Their families are expected to take care of them. A really interesting thing about Wookiees is they reach adulthood at 18. A lot of long-lived species in fiction tend to reach adulthood much later, like in their 50s or 60s. But Wookiees are adults for a very long period of time. And I'll mention this again later, but that's got to be amazing having like hundreds of years to master skills. I'd imagine a lot of them will just have a level of like experience and technical ability that a lot of other races can only dream of. So Wookiee biology continued. So despite looking kind of like monster people, Wookiee intelligence is about the same as a human, maybe a little bit better. Like the actual Wookiee is probably about as smart as an above average human. I don't know what that would be in practice, like an average IQ of 110 or something like that, but they're generally speaking quite intelligent creatures. In particular, they have really, really good memories, which I'd imagine you kind of need if you live for 400 years, and very good spatial intelligence. Like I said earlier, having a very good memory and living for hundreds of years and being naturally inclined towards craftsmanship and mechanics and stuff like that probably gives you a level of skill and experience that other species that don't live as long can't even reach. So, an interesting thing, and this is once again a little confusing with regards to the movies, is Wookiees do actually understand other languages perfectly well. Many of them, I guess, I don't know if speak is the right term, but they're fluent in a lot of other languages. I think most Wookiees are fluent in Basic, which is English for us, the viewer. The problem is that their vocal cords evolved in a fundamentally different way. So they can't make the type of sounds that would be needed to speak in Basic or most other languages. They can certainly read it and they can certainly understand it. Han is able to speak Shriwook fluently, which is the Wookiee language. So they're able to have normal conversations. And it seems a bit weird to an outsider because you have Han just talking to him normally like he's like a cat or a pet or something. And then he makes like the roaring sound. But they're actually just having a normal conversation. Humans don't have the vocal cords to speak in Shriwook, but Han has learned it over time, and Chewie knows Basic, so they're perfectly able to have long conversations with each other. I just find that dynamic kind of interesting. There are actually a number of subspecies of Wookiees, like Plains Wookiees and I think Coastal Wookiees and stuff like that. As with humans, though, and like different human races and stuff, they aren't really counted as subspecies. It's just they're just humans. They're just humans, or if they're different enough, they're near humans. It's to an outsider, that's just kind of how they're viewed. And to an outsider, like Wookiees are just Wookiees. They're creatures that look similar from the planet Kashik. It's just kind of the way they view it. So given their immense strength, technical abilities, the way people see them as being kind of a primitive backward people, and the fact that they don't look like humans, they're extremely popular as slaves, as we've seen in the movies, and Kashyyyk basically gets constantly attacked. Also, as previously mentioned, there's lots of valuable resources on Kashyyyk that various shady characters want to steal. And so it's just something the Wookiees have kind of had to learn to deal with. And as we'll get in later, that's part of the reason they've developed a bit of a warrior culture is they always have to be ready in case pirates or slavers or whoever shows up and starts carrying them away. Okay, so Wookiee settlements, we're going to get a bit more into them as a people. So given that the surface of Kashyyyk is a massive death trap, Wookiees live in villages or small cities up in the Worsher trees. They're designed to only be held up by branches. They don't have repulsor lifts or anything like that. So they're built around trees or they're built on branches and just ways like that. Some trees are big enough that they like carve almost like a cave. They'll carve houses into the side of it. The Wookiees have developed very advanced bioengineering and botany, so they're able to get the trees to kind of grow in ways to create like natural roads from tree to tree, maybe to grow into a particular shape or width that would be good for building a house around, and that sort of thing. So basically everything on Kashyyyk is made out of wood. Given that the surface is a death trap, it's kind of hard to go down and try to mine some metal. I'm not sure how, even if they had access to the surface, how much iron or whatever metals you're looking for Kashyyyk actually has, how difficult that would be. So if they need to use metal in something, it pretty much needs to be imported from off-world. Rosher wood, though, is, sci-fi, like superwood. So the Wookiees have mastered all kinds of ways of treating it. So they can treat it to give it properties similar to metal or carbon fiber, and they can use it for pretty much anything you would normally use metal for. It's even, if treated properly, can be used in starship hulls, although you need to combine it with a deflector shield. But yeah, basically anything can be made out of metal. Now you might go, Argent, it doesn't seem like a good idea to make everything out of wood, because we know what used to happen in cities. Now the thing is to keep in mind that Rosher wood is naturally very fire resistant. Also, it's constantly raining and humid on the planet, and there's ways of treating it that the Wookiees do, and ways that the villages are designed that fire is just not really an issue. So the actual overall technology level of Wookiees is similar to other parts of the galaxy. They just have a preference for traditional architecture. They have a preference for, well, I mean, as I said, like up here, let's be honest, if you could live in a kilometer high tree in a master crafted wooden house, wouldn't you? I think most of us would find that pretty cool. So, I mean, could they build like advanced concrete? Well, you can't really on Kashik because the ground is a death trap. But they certainly have the technology to build like planet wide cities like Coruscant or stuff like that. But they just don't really like doing that. They like their tree houses. They like being in harmony with nature. They like the kind of mixture of the organic and the civilized. So it's how their culture works. They're like, well, we want to live in cool trees and in like master crafted Wookiee houses. They have whatever, I'm not sure how you describe them, maybe like showers or, but they have all the modern conveniences within their wood houses. They're just made out of wood, and they have a classical style to them. So, Wookiee family structure. This is actually really interesting. So Wookiees are monogamous, and they have a marriage structure more or less the same as other species. Wookiees live in nuclear families, which are organized into clans, and the structure of their society is largely patriarchal. The father is the head of the household. I think most of their chiefs and political leaders are male, but once again in a fairly like traditional complementary way, that both men and female and male Wookiees are happy with. It's once again, the Wookiees are actually kind of a chill, laid back people in a lot of ways. You just don't want to get them mad. The Wookiees also have the concept of an honor family, which is people they're especially close to, who aren't blood related to them, and the honor family may even include non-Wookiees. So Chewie considered Luke, Leia, and Han to be his family as much as his actual relatives were on Kashyyyk, because he'd fought and bled with them. He viewed them as good, honorable people. Obviously, there's the life debt thing, but Wookiees will, once a Wookiee offers you their friendship and considers you part of their honor family, they will always be there for you, and they will always keep their word. They have a very low reproductive rate. That's not because I don't think they're capable of having more, but there's only it's difficult to build huge population centers up in the trees. Agriculture is also a little difficult. My understanding is the Wookiees have colonized the moons that orbit Kashyyyk, and those are largely used for agriculture. Food is one of the things that they need to import. So most of them only have one or two pups. Two or three pups. Also, given their lifespan, you don't need as high a reproductive rate because you might have like 5 or 6 generations living together. Pups, after they come of age, generally live with their parents in multi-generational homes. And males are expected to find a steady source of income so they could get a family, get married, and have children. That is the basic social expectation of male Wookiees. While women still could obviously work in their society, it's the man's job to make sure everybody's fed and happy. Wookiees also have a school system. much like any other sentient species. And they're trained from an extremely young age in wood carving and repairing things and all kinds of different technical skills. That's the thing the Wookiees really excel in. This was kind of a funny quote from Star Wars. I think this is one of the books. Han says to Chewie, "Hey, you're the married one. Find me a human girl with Mala's brains and silky hair, and maybe I'll consider it." Mala, her actual name is longer, is Chewbacca's wife. They have a very good relationship. Chewie's away a lot, saving the galaxy with Han. I think it makes Mala a little lonely sometimes, but in Wookiee culture, it's accepted because Chewbacca owes Han a life debt. Han is his bro for life. It's honorable to be out there protecting your bro. Also, the Wookiees have a lot of reason to hate the Empire, and they're proud of Chewie being out there having a big positive role in the galaxy. Chewbacca only has one child, but once again, that's not one pup. But once again, that's not very uncommon in Wookiee society. So the Wookiee political structure, which is actually pretty cool. So Kashyyyk is extremely decentralized. I'm filling in a bit here. Basically all of the tree villages or small cities are. City state might be kind of a stretch, but it gives you kind of the idea. They're all completely independent and they're led by a chieftain. And then there's a council of elders who kind of act like a city council or a counterbalance. I think inheritance laws vary a little bit. I'm not sure exactly how it works if the council selects the next chief. It's generally hereditary, but not necessarily, from my understanding. Like if the son of the current chief is like a complete ignoramus, they might make someone else from another prominent family a chief. My understanding is Wookiees definitely have nobility within the capital. I think that there's certain families that are more prestigious than others, and they tend to be from whom they draw chieftains. Just to note it, they've also colonized both of Kashyk's moons and Alaris Prime, which is another planet in the same star system that also has worship trees. So the Wookiees, despite being very decentralized, they do have a high king or a high chieftain. There is the Kashyyyk Royal City. I don't think it has any other name, which is, I would imagine, by far the biggest settlement. And the king rules that directly. We aren't entirely sure how the selection process works, but it has some sort of elective element to it. So either kind of like with Naboo, the royal families or the nobility, or they call them patricians in some source material, select one of their own to be the king, or maybe the chieftains from all over the planet will nominate one of their own and select them as a king. Wookiees tend to be very consensus based, so I'm not sure if there's really been any kind of succession crisis. Now, the king doesn't have direct executive authority like in the Empire and some monarchies we see. But he is the High King. All Wookiees acknowledge him as the highest authority in the land and owe personal loyalty to him. And I would imagine he does all the things a normal head of state does. He sets foreign policy. If ambassadors come, he receives their credentials, I would imagine. If someone needs to sign treaties or trade agreements, or talk to representatives from the Senate, I'm assuming that him or one of his elders or ministers or whatever would do that. They need a head of state for the Wookiee people to represent them on the galactic stage. The king also will mediate between clans, as I don't think there's that many clan wars or disputes, but he's seen as kind of the Supreme Court, a somewhat impartial figure whose judgment they can rely on. Now, the king gets a lot of power during war. I believe he's the only one that can call for a war, and he gains immense powers during that time period. Most of the time, the cities are pretty much left to do whatever they want, but if there needs to be a war, they have a figure there who's in a legal position to seize power. The Wookiees do have their own senator, and there's also a number of elders from the planet who go and act as his advisors and represent different cities within the Wookiee planet. Okay, so let's talk about the Wookiees at war. So Wookiees are actually pretty chill in general. They're kind of known for being gentle giants. They're very unlikely to start a fight without justification. Even within their society, if there's disputes, it's almost never comes to blows. They'll do stuff where they try to like stamp their feet and roar and intimidate each other or just argue. But actual fighting between Wookiees is not viewed very positively. Although I think there's one school and a couple schools on their planet for wrestling. The issue, though, is they were known for their legendary tempers. They're pretty chill until they're not, and when they go into a berserker rage, they just tear apart and destroy absolutely everything in their path. Given that they're huge and extremely strong and extremely tough, you do not want to face an angry Wookiee. That is not a place you would like to be. That's part of the reason why they don't use unarmed combat and use their claws. Because getting into that scenario kind of gets their blood pumping and raises the chances exponentially of them going into a berserker rage. And like I said, they like discipline and organized fighting, and it's not a good thing. If you attack another Wookiee with your claws, you're a mad claw, you get exiled to the surface of the planet, and you're not going to live very long down there. So Wookiees will use a wide array of weapons. At close range, they use big swords. I have a picture of one on the next page. And lances, specifically vibro lances. Vibro weapons are kind of like the progressive knife from Evangelion or something. It vibrates at like a subsonic or subatomic or some whatever sci-fi it is level. So it's a lance, but it can go through like heavy armor and probably vehicles and stuff like that. So it looks kind of primitive, but the Imperial Guard, for instance, use force pikes. And it's not uncommon for elite warriors in the Star Wars universe to use close combat weapons. Also, it's important to keep in mind that combat in the Star Wars universe tends to take place at very close range. Blasters only have an effective range of like 50 to 100 meters. They're much smaller than what modern firearms or slug throwers, as they call them in universe, have. So if the other person's like 300 meters away or whatever the typical range is for an assault rifle, that's going to be a little rough getting into close combat. If they're 50 meters away and you're a Wookiee and you're fast, then that's a much better proposition. What they're especially known for, though, is their ranged weapons. And we'll get into that in a minute. So the Wookiees have a strong warrior culture that doesn't come from internal disputes, though. That's just because Kashik gets raided every other day, and they kind of have to be able to pick up weapons at a moment's notice and fight off slavers. Also, there's the super predators, and pretty much everyone needs to know how to fight and use weapons if you want to survive against the giant reptile cats or the intelligent spiders or the slightly smaller Rancor. There isn't really that much in the way of internal fighting that we know of. So Wookiees don't wear armor. This is partially because their combat style focuses on mobility. They're also very tough. I'm sure actually their fur is fairly effective in blocking stuff like shrapnel, maybe melee weapons. I don't think it would block a blaster, but Wookiees are so inherently tough, they might be able to take a couple shots from a relatively weak blaster before going down. Also, it's not going to be easy to make armor for a creature that big and who's covered in dense hair. Like, how are you going to fit it on? How are you going to like make it tight? It's just not going to work. There are Wookiee spacesuits. The Wookiees are a space-faring people, so they obviously have those. And if they're going into like hazardous environment, they have suits and stuff for all that kind of thing. But armor is just not really used. What looks like armor they're wearing is like ceremonial stuff, or to designate them as like a officer or something like that. It's not for any real protective benefit. Also, armor is seen as dishonorable. Wearing like you're supposed to fight the opponent Wookiee to Wookiee, and it's cowardly to hide behind armor. Once again, Wookiees at war really need bandoliers, vests, and utility belts because there's no pockets, and they have to carry their first aid equipment and ammunition and other stuff somehow. So obviously they wear bandoliers. So Wookiee weapons. The Wookiees like to produce weapons that are very modern and effective, but have a very traditional look to them. So that's things like really big swords, vibro lances, and of course the Wookiee premier weapon that everybody knows because Chewbacca has one is the bowcaster. Now the bowcaster is not actually a string-fired weapon, although it has a string on it. I don't entirely understand the purpose of it. I think it's mostly for show and as a stabilization mechanism. So bowcasters are railguns. They have a quarrel which they fire, and it gets put up to really high speeds. It has a coat of plasma on it, and it's a very devastating weapon. The actual bow part in the two orbs are kind of a magnetic stabilizer, so it comes out of like the barrel, and those things make sure it's going in a straight line. Once again, the Wookiees wanted to make a weapon that paid homage to some of the traditional weapons they used before they became more technologically developed, and it just looks cool. So they said, you know what, we're going to go with that. So bowcasters can have anywhere from 6 to 35 shots. I'm not entirely sure if they're semi-auto or they have some sort of cranking mechanism. I think it depends on the bowcaster. It has a similar range to a blaster rifle or a blaster pistol, wherein it's only about accurate out to about 500 to 100 meters. Particularly in combat conditions. Obviously, for like stormtroopers, if they're like crouched and they have time to aim, they can shoot out significantly further than that. But in actual combat, the range of their weapons is only about 50 to 100 meters. And I forgot to put it in here, but the range of a bowcaster is about the same. Accurate shots are about 30 to 50 meters, and the general usable range is about 100 meters. There's other weapons the Wookiees have. The Wookiees do have slug throwers that they will sometimes use. Now, slug throwers in the Star Wars universe are not widely adopted for a number of different reasons. On one hand, it's just seen as very primitive and barbaric to use them. A lot of modern armor will just block it. Like Stormtrooper armor, I'm pretty sure will just block most bullets. There's also the ammo issue. It's much easier to carry around a couple power packs and gas magazines than it is to carry around a whole bunch of heavy ammunition. Something that slug throwers are still sometimes used for is sniper rifles, because they have very long range compared to blasters. So a lot of peoples who are fighting asymmetric warfare, Grievous's people use these to great effect. Will make use of them because of their range. So I was trying to come up with what is a real world equivalent to a bowcaster. Because it's more powerful than a standard blaster, but what does that even mean? So a bowcaster, depending on the model, is about 20 pounds. That is a very heavy weapon. In comparison, the AK-74 is about 7 to 8 pounds when loaded, and I think the M16 is similar. So that's a very heavy weapon. So I was trying to find what is a weapon in real life, a small arm that's about 20 pounds, and I figured I'd try to find one that's 20 pounds loaded, and the bowcaster being just the standard weight, because I don't think the quarrels weigh very much. So the one that I was able to come up with is the BAR, or the Browning Automatic Rifle, which was designed during World War I as a sort of intermediary gun between a machine gun and a standard rifle, having a 20-round box magazine and a bipod. It is very difficult to shoot. It has a very high kick, but it is what's known as a battle rifle instead of an assault rifle, so it fires a full-sized cartridge. So I put an example here of what a cartridge for a bar looks like versus a standard NATO cartridge. As you can see, that's a lot bigger. It has a lot more kinetic force. Obviously, this is sci-fi, so this thing is going to be stronger than a real-world firearm. But If you see sometimes when Chewie shoots people, they go flying across the room. It's an extremely powerful weapon that punches through armor. The thing is, though, the BAR in real life is very heavy, especially given its limited ammo capacity. Wookiees, however, are able to use a similar weapon uh, as if it was a carbine or even a pistol. There's parts where Chewbacca can easily fire it with one hand. So it's basically like a Browning automatic rifle, but more powerful that can be fired one handed. And humans can't really use this. Maybe they could use it if they have it like leaned up against something or they're trying to take a precision shot. But yeah, and I think that's cool that it's more powerful than a real world weapon, but not like crazy more powerful. It's not like they're walking around with an M1 full size machine gun. They have a battle rifle that is terrifying and very strong, but it's not like a crazy weapon. Okay, so the life debt. To kind of round this up, I tried to make this very clear. The Wookiees have a culture that's very much based on honor and respect, keeping your word, paying back your debts, only fighting when necessary. If you're going to be dealing with someone, you deal with them with honesty and integrity. These are all values. So in Wookiee culture, a life debt happens as someone saves your life. In the case of Han Solo in Legends, or as I call it, canon, Han Solo actually did work for the Empire. He graduated top of his class. He was an officer, and he came across Chewie. I think he was being whipped, and the guy was about to kill him, and he saved Chewie and he helped him escape. That got him kicked out of the Imperial Navy, but it did incur a life debt. So it's slightly vague and kind of changes a bit, but a life debt is something that actually can't be discharged. So even if Han was to save, sorry, even if Chewie was to save Han's life 40 times, he would still hold him a life debt. And it's something that can be extended, if I think the Wookiee wants to family members for multiple generations. And it's something that can be passed on to their children. It's not exactly service per se, but you're promising you're going to be there for them. You're going to protect them if they ever need help. You're going to help them out. Basically, if a Wookiee owes you a life debt, they will be your best friend. They'll be your bro for life. And given how like competent Wookiees are at fighting and with technical skills, and how they're an honorable and loyal race, that is a pretty nice thing to be. It also reflects good on you as a person if a Wookiee finds you worthy to kind of follow you around. In the case of Chewie, he extended the life debt to include Luke, Leia, and their children. And after Chewie dies, spoiler alert, in Legends, his son decides to take up his life debt, and he goes and becomes bros for life with the gang. Now, there is a practical side to this. This is a very good way of building long-term alliances. I'm sure, like, if a Wookiee from one tribe saves a Wookiee from another tribe, and they become best friends forever, that helps relations between the two. If the debt lasts generations, there's a lot of goodwill that's built up. And if someone from off-world saves you, then it's a good way of building alliances with other parts of the galaxy. I mean, Han becomes a general in the Alliance. Luke becomes the head of the Jedi Order. I think Leia briefly becomes Chancellor in Legends. I think she does, either during Children of the Jedi or the Black Fleet Crisis. But I mean, that worked out pretty well for Chewie. He wound up being bros for life with some pretty well connected people. As a side note, Force users appear within the Wookiees at the same rate as in humans or other species. It's just given how tight knit the family and clan structure is, they generally just don't join the Jedi Order. Then again, the idea of a Wookiee with a lightsaber just going to tout on someone is extremely scary. So maybe it's for the best that they don't, that many of them don't become Jedi. I doubt any Wookiee has ever become a Sith. The other thing that's good about the life debt is it's good optics. The Wookiees tend to be pretty isolationist. They don't leave Kashik that often. But if they go around kind of doing good deeds, attaching themselves to someone who, if they save their life, is probably an honorable person themselves, that gives a lot of respect towards them. It helps to kind of get rid of the idea that they're just these monster people. And Chewie, part of the reason he's so beloved is being a hero of the rebellion, and being like such a loyal friend to Han has given his species a lot of prestige and respect, and really improved kind of their standing in the galaxy. So, in conclusion, I hope everybody learned something about our favorite noble fuzzballs, and that you enjoyed the video. I've been wanting to do a video about the Wookiees for quite a while. There's a lot of research and speculation that went into this, but I had a lot of fun making it. I just think they're very interesting because, once again, they look like these monster people, but they're actually very sophisticated. And a lot of the things about them that don't seem sophisticated or seem kind of barbaric come from the fact that they're just a conservative people who like their traditions. They like their traditional houses. They like their weapons to look traditional, even if they're fully functional. The decorations they wear, like the helmets and the shoulder pads and whatever, are also supposed to look traditional. And it's more just an active aesthetic choice than any kind of limitation on their intelligence or technical abilities. But in a lot of other ways, like I said, they're a very conservative society. They're decentralized with city-states. They have a high king. They have chieftains. They have elder Wookiees kind of hold power in the Council of Elders. They have a very traditional family structure. And overall, like, despite what you might think, they're actually a pretty chill people. They're very hardworking and loyal, but Wookiees, generally speaking, will only fight if they're threatened or if something happens that triggers a rage. Like if Han gets hurt or something, or he's in danger, that might trigger a rage in Chewbacca and force help anybody who happens to be in his path. People have been wanting some more pop culture content, and I agree, I haven't done that much. But like I said, it helps that it's interesting to see what lies behind the surface and to kind of take a deeper look at something. So as always, I hope you found it enjoyable. Thank you a lot for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And if you know anybody who might be interested in this, please share it with them or share it on social media. I know that these are very long, but I like to think that I don't do really padding in these, at least anymore. And that I was basically talking about something substantive for the entirety of the video. Anyways, guys, God bless, and I'll talk to you again real soon.